Ladies and gentlemen, grab your pen and paper and write down 3 things you're grateful for. This is OD on Life. Come get high with us.
Hey everybody, it's Dan O'Donnell here. This is OD on Life, episode number 3. With me in studio right now is Ben Finnegan. And when I say in studio, Ben, have you ever been in a studio quite this nice?
No, actually, I must say that this is the nicest studio I've ever been in.
We'll have some pictures on the website on OD on Life. You can check it out. And for such a nice studio, we threw this thing together in about 15 minutes. So you'll be impressed with our craftsmanship.
Yeah, quite crafty.
So Ben he lives here in Chiang Mai, where I also live, and I met Ben in a roundabout way through a mutual friend. Ben got into online business about a year ago, and this mutual friend is Johnny, and he's got the Travel Like a Boss podcast, which many of you probably have checked out. And if you're interested in online business and you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. It's the Travel Like a Boss podcast. Johnny helped me out a lot, and I know that Johnny has helped Ben out a lot. We'll definitely talk about that. So like I said, Ben has gotten into online business in the past year and has had good success with it, and I think is consistently improving his trajectory there. And has agreed to come on the podcast. We're going to talk about a lot of health issues and solutions that Ben is very passionate about, and cover all kinds of other things too. So I think a good place to jump in, talking about health, can we get right into the struggle that you had with Lyme's?
Yeah, so I was bitten by a tick when I was 8 years old and camping on Long Island. And what happened was I ended up getting this bullseye rash, and it really looked like a bullseye. You can type in into Google Lyme's disease bullseye rash, and you can check out the images. And what happened was we went to the park ranger, and we looked at the rash, and we said, hey, is this something we should be concerned about? And he said, no, don't worry about it. You don't need to see a doctor. It's just Lyme's disease, and it's nothing to worry about. So foolishly, we didn't look into it anymore. This is the days before Google. And so, we had no idea that this was something serious. And what ended up happening was this came up again 8 years later when I was 16 and living and training and fighting in China. I ended up breaking my arm, tweaking my leg, and brought my immune system down low enough to where the Lyme's disease that had been in remission and I'd been symptom-free for 8 years came out. And so what happened was my natural immune system was so depressed by the combination of bad food, bad air, bad water, and the fact that I had seriously injured my body, that Lyme's disease came out of remission and ended up really messing me up. And so I've been on a journey for the last 10 years to cure myself through natural methods using a paleo diet and a high-fat ketogenic diet.
Can I stop you real quick? A detail there. This is something I didn't catch the last time you told me, or maybe you told it differently, but the park ranger told you what it was? He knew it was Lyme?
Yes.
And he said it was no big deal?
Yes. So
the way I thought the story went was you showed it to him and maybe he didn't realize what it was.
No. So actually the park ranger, we saw posters hanging all over, and this was when Lyme's disease was first starting to be locally known in the Northeast. And so there were posters everywhere saying, watch out for deer ticks, they carry Lyme's disease, look for a bullseye rash. And so what happened was, after I got bitten, we went directly to the park ranger and we said, hey, there's a sign on your little park ranger station, and it's saying warning Lyme's disease. And so it was kind of off-putting that you never mentioned it, but I understand. He was either a government employee not making much money or a volunteer, and so he didn't really know anything about it. It's just a poster that was up on his board, and so I can't blame him at all. But I must say that Lyme's disease has brought me to where I am now, and where I am now is a place where I'm happy, healthy, and ODing on life.
Nice. That's really interesting to me. And so that's a really great spin to put on it too, because you're right. You would probably be in a much different place if you'd never had that experience.
Absolutely. And I must say that dealing with something like Lyme's disease that really forced me to focus on health has brought me to a place that I would have never gotten to if I hadn't had to focus on it and spend 10 years of my life dedicating myself to the research behind nutrition and the science behind optimizing your health.
And when I met you, speaking of nutrition, we were at a function, party, whatever you want to call it, and you had your own salt shaker, grinder, whatever it was, pretty big, and your own bottle of coconut oil, and you were dousing everything in coconut oil and putting salt all over it, and everybody was kind of looking at you. And then I remember, it might have been, I don't know if I asked you or somebody else around did, and then Mark Brenwall was sitting there, who was on episode number 1, and you started into episode number 2 was Mark, and you started to tell me about it, and Mark goes, oh, here we go. I go, okay, apparently this guy, he likes to tell people about this. So, I mean, you do, you get into it.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, you'll talk about the minerals and salt like it's the latest blockbuster movie that you're excited to talk about it, even though I know you've talked about it a million times. And so why is it so important to you? What kind of impact do you think that kind of info can have on people's health?
I'm passionate about nutrition because of my past. And I came from a place where my health was seriously in jeopardy. And over the course of the last 10 years, I've been focused on healing myself in a holistic way. I came from a place where Western medicine was unable to aid me. And it was actually doing harm to my body to a point where I had to go cold turkey from Western medicine and start healing my body and listening to my body and replenishing it with nutrients that I had kept myself from having by eating a traditional Western diet.
Something that sort of unrelated, sort of related. When my mom was in the hospital after her surgery, I remember going in there, and I found out while she was in there, I went and ate at the cafeteria. And the cafeteria at that hospital is some of the best home-cooked food. They're actually, the ladies there were 3 ladies from the Philippines that cooked awesome food, and it was like the cheapest lunch you could get, cheapest dinner you could get in town. My friends laughed at me. I used to go in there and eat all the time. And then I'd go up to my mom's room and see what they brought her. And, I mean, this is in a hospital. And it was like red Jell-O. She got these gross little like hot dogs with some like gravy on it. I'm what is going on here? She had like the most recent and best drugs money could buy and all that. Painkillers and all the other stuff, antibiotics, and they're giving her Jell-O. Like, you're propping the body up with all this stuff that's needed from the outside. And you got to rebuild, man. You just had surgery. I mean, yeah, you might need a light diet I'm not a doctor. But Jell-O? I mean, there's sugar in it. You need some sugar, but come on, like at least orange juice or something. I mean, wow. It struck me. It was interesting to me. And, something that I see, not just medicine, but in life is a lot of times people are trying to treat symptoms rather than why are these symptoms occurring. Like, I'm tired. Give me the double shot, like, espresso on my way to work. Like, okay, well, maybe there's too many lights in your room while you're sleeping, or it's too hot, or you need to not drink that last coffee in the late afternoon that makes it so you can't fall asleep in the evening. Like thinking from the terms of solutions to the underlying problem, not treating symptoms.
Yeah, and you also notice in Western medicine that, when sort of Western lifestyle, that it's not just treating symptoms, but it's also suppressing symptoms. And so you might not cure the underlying reason why you have a headache, but we can give you a pill that will alleviate the symptoms of having a headache. You still have it, yeah, but you just can't tell that you have it.
Sports is terrible at that. I remember, I never went to a high level, but even in high school football, there's all these kids downing tons of Advil every day just so their knees don't hurt too bad when they're out there playing football. And I know you were talking about fighting hurt. And, there's this kind of like, if you're a man, you'll go out there anyway, type of thing. Like, take it for the team, get out there, you know, you can get through it, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you cover up that, like, your body's trying to talk to you, like, you have a headache because either maybe you need some water, you need some more sleep, you got hit in the head and you need to take it easy on your head. But, you know, I'm a big believer in listening to your body. If you're really tired and you don't quite know why, even if you can't figure it out, maybe you need to take a nap. You know, like, maybe you have a cold that's about to set in. You don't know that. Well, drink some water, take a nap, and maybe you'll never get the cold.
Absolutely. So you touched on a thing saying fighting. So
Yeah.
I might as well say it. When I was 15, I moved to China and I started training. Well, I had been training for years, but I started training at the Shaolin Temple in China. And
I can't let you get into it that easily.
oh,
How
goodness
did you
gracious.
start training? How were you allowed to enter the Shaolin Temple?
Well, actually, when I first arrived in China, I didn't have a guidebook. I didn't have a translation book. I had a one-way ticket and a letter written to me in old-style Chinese by my master back in Florida who had defected from China. He was a personal bodyguard and a 36th generation Shaolin monk. He was a personal bodyguard to lots of high-up officials in the Communist Party and ended up escaping by swimming to Hong Kong Island and then hopping on a junk and worked his passage until he ended up in Jamaica and met a Jamaican Chinese woman who worked in a circus and ended up moving to Florida and starting this huge network of martial arts schools. He has more than 40 schools worldwide, and he teaches praying mantis kung fu. And so I ended up training with him in Florida after starting Taekwondo when I was 3, and always boxing, wrestling, rolling around. And actually, I ended up falling in love with a sport called San Da, which is basically Chinese Muay Thai. It's kickboxing, but incorporates wrestling throws and takedowns.
Okay, so are you sure all of what you just told us isn't the plot to some 70s kung fu movie? Because that reminds me of like every Van Damme and Chuck Norris movie and all the older like dubbed over kung fu movies. That guy swam to Hong Kong?
Yes, he did.
How long is that swim?
It's actually not that far, but it is quite a distance. So think about the swim from Alcatraz to San Francisco. It's a pretty harrowing swim.
Wow.
And so
Daytime or nighttime, do you know?
I have no idea. But that's the preface for the crazy kung fu movie, and here's my little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up training there, and at that point, I knew something was up. Like, I needed to go train martial arts. This is my life. This is what I'm going to dedicate myself to. And the reason why I was able to do that was because I came from a non-traditional background. So my parents are circus performers and circus owners. So my dad is a professional juggler and juggling teacher. And from the age of 4 to the age of 14, I traveled around the country doing shows and teaching people how to juggle. We've been to over 2,000 elementary schools, about 500 middle schools, and more than 100 high schools, as well as hundreds of summer camps, teaching people how to juggle and bringing positivity to the world by teaching people to juggle and breaking their barriers. A lot of folks, when they first come into a juggling class, cross their arms and say, "I'll never be able to juggle. This is stupid." And it's funny because about 5 minutes later, they're laughing, hanging out with their friends, and totally loosened up. And I think that juggling is a fantastic icebreaker because most people that see it have oftentimes like tried. So you'll be, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 years old, and there are 3 apples on the counter. You'll pick one up and try to throw it around, and boom, they end up falling on the ground, and oftentimes you'll have someone around you that makes fun of you. "Oh, yeah, you can't juggle. That's really silly." And so a lot of people have negative connotations when it comes to juggling and have an unrealistic perspective when it comes to how difficult it is to do a basic pattern. And so what we did was we traveled around the world and taught people to juggle and helped them to realize how foolish their own limitations were. And so with that unconventional upbringing, we ended up coming off the road and retiring basically as a family act. And my parents retired in Florida, and I tried about 6 months of high school when I realized, you know what, I can't do this. I can't go from this crazy circus lifestyle where I'm breathing fire, eating fire, juggling chainsaws, and riding a unicycle to regular high school humdrum existence. And so I ended up dedicating myself to martial arts and training twice a day, every day. For a couple hours every day. And the way that I was able to do that was by telling my parents, I'm going to quit school. And so I ended up taking my education, putting it on pause, and dedicating myself full-time to training and working full-time as a busboy. And so I was a busboy and saving up all my money. It took me about a year, and I saved up all my money, and I bought a one-way ticket to China. And basically, I had no money, no translation book, no guidebook, and all I had was a letter from my master written in old-style Chinese that to this day, I still don't know exactly what it said, but to the extent it said, when I look in the mirror, I see myself. And when I look at this student, I see myself. And he said, if you take this to any martial arts school in China, they'll accept you. And so I ended up making my way from Beijing to the Shaolin Temple in the Henan province, and I wanted to train at the Shaolin Temple. And so I ended up going to the Shaolin Temple and putting myself out there, and I ended up getting accepted as the first student under 18 that wasn't of Chinese descent accepted at the temple. So I was able to train martial arts there. I moved on to the Dongfeng Shaolin Orpo Wushu College because I need to start going to school as well. And so there I spent quite a bit of time, a couple years intermittently, training and fighting and following my passion for martial arts. Now, in between that, I also had my health issues with Lyme's disease, so I flew back to the States, spent some time there, and then ended up flying back to China. And this other time that I was in China, I was there training, but then I was also working on doing product sourcing in Shenzhen, China, which is right across the border from Hong Kong, and focusing on really making a living in China, not just fighting, but also finding other ways and other avenues of making a living that isn't subsistence, but also could give me something that would last me the rest of my life.
Let me ask you again about the details of getting into. Is there anything you're forgetting to tell us about getting into the Shaolin Temple? Did you show them the letter, and was it quick, or how did it work?
Well, I showed them the letter, and they weren't too impressed. And so
did they know this guy?
Yeah,
they still knew.
They knew this guy. Yeah. He had a long reputation, and he's kind of a big shot in the industry. And
so why weren't they impressed?
I think they just generally are trying not to be impressed with anything.
Oh, okay.
And so they were kind of testing me a little bit, and so they didn't want me to train there. And so I sort of camped out. I had like almost a hunger strike, and I stayed outside the Shaolin Temple and just waited there until they accepted me. And so sort of through my own stubbornness, now I see it as a little bit of stupidity, but through my own stubbornness, I ended up getting admission and spent a couple of years of my life training there, which is really great.
Now I'm dwelling on this a little bit because I've heard several people that have had a lot of success in whatever field they choose who have done really similar things to that. There's a guy who trains real estate, and if I remember right, he bothered a guy for a ride, and the guy said, basically, I think the story was something like this: if my house is closer to where you're going than where we are now, you can come with me to my house and then walk. Because I don't think he even knew who he was. And if I remember right, the guy said sure. The guy went in his house, but didn't lock his car. And so this guy slept in the car of the guy who he wanted to be his mentor, and was there in the morning when the guy came out to go to work. And what are you doing here? I thought you were going to walk home, type of thing. And he's like, can I just tag along with you and learn? And this guy wanted it bad enough to sleep there in the car. You're making it, either they're going to think you're insane and be scared, or they're going to go, this guy really wants it. And so I wonder, and again, that's not the only story like that I've heard. Sylvester Stallone, there's a similar story about him with the agents and coming back over and over again. And I think I heard something about him sleeping in an agent's office, or outside the office, something similar to what you did. So do you think there would have been other ways to do it, or did you show them that out of all the guys who showed up with a letter from somebody, that you were the one who wanted it the most?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I had the passion, and by being so extreme and knowing that that's where I wanted to train, I sort of proved that I was willing to put up with the hard training and to not give up, and to be a person that's crazy enough to decide to live that type of lifestyle, because it's not an easy lifestyle. No one wants to torture themselves for hours every day doing really hard training. But it is a necessary part of people's character if you really want to succeed and really want to be the best. And that's something that's really important to me. And in everything that I do, I'm a really competitive person. And it's surprising to some people around me if they don't really know me too well, but I'm extremely competitive, and I love being the best at whatever I'm doing and trying my hardest. And I guess I prefaced that a little incorrectly. I'm not trying to be the best. I'm trying to be the best I can be. And I want to give 100%. And if I feel like I'm cheating myself, I am disappointed. So, like, if I'm in a martial arts class, Brazilian jiu-jitsu or wrestling, and we're doing laps in the room, most people are just doing small circles, and they're trying to make their circles as small as possible. I'm the one crazy guy that's trying to touch every corner as I run around, because I feel like I'm cheating if I don't.
Okay, so something I want to say out there, because I know there's going to be at least one person that listens to this who is trying to get into, whether it's a martial arts school or they want somebody to mentor them in some other field, whatever it is, they want a job at a certain business, and they are getting the cold shoulder and ignored or whatever. I think it's important to try to put yourself in the shoes of that person that you want to work with or help from or whatever it is, because people at high levels of things, they get a lot of people who, I'm no big shot, but in my real estate career, and now with online marketing and stuff like that, I have people come to me that really the gist of what they're asking is kind of like, teach me, do this for me almost. Johnny has had people ask, can you build my site for me? It's like, look, that's not what I do, But what I'm getting at is, if you can somehow show the person that you want to help you that you are going to work your butt off and listen to them and implement what they're going to teach you, that for most people is hard to resist, because most people get a kick out of that. They can give you a little piece of advice that can really change your life, because you're the one doing all the work. You don't expect them to do it for you. And when you take their advice, you come back having tried it. And maybe you're, okay, look, I tried it. I think this didn't go quite right. What did I do wrong? That is like almost irresistible to a lot of people who have any kind of like teaching gene in them at all. But what they're trying to avoid, this is just my take on it, what they're trying to avoid is the people who aren't that serious. And, like with the Shaolin example, like everybody's heard of that place. And, what do you want here? Do you just want to tell your friends that you studied there for a week and a half just so you can say like you're some kind of Shaolin guy? I'm sure they must get a lot of that.
Yeah, you actually see that quite a bit. Yeah. There's a lot of tours that come through, and they have, these package tours where you'll come train at Shaolin, and you end up paying, hundreds of dollars every month for, you know, a terrible room, and you eat terrible food.
You get a T-shirt or something?
And you get a T-shirt, and you get some photos of you, you know, in this crane stance.
Oh, yeah.
And then they snap the photo and they fall over. And you're like, oh man, you post that on Facebook. Oh man, hard training in Shaolin. Yeah, it's definitely there are a lot of people that fake it until they make it, and that is actually a saying that I don't condone. I think that you should work hard until you do it, and then once you do it, you should tell people that you did it. And you should not be afraid of sharing your accomplishments, but you shouldn't embellish your accomplishments to make yourself look bigger or better than you actually are. I think that you should be very real about it, because a lot of people end up listening to their own press and they believe the BS that they tell themselves.
Yeah, and you're gonna turn off anybody that could be a teacher to you. When, I mean, nobody likes to hear I don't know, in your example, you know, some cocky blue belt or something acting big, puffing his chest around a bunch of black belts. Like, if you act respectful and listen to people's advice and, you know, just show respect.
Well, it depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to find somebody to mentor you and to really show you how to become the best you can be in whatever field, I personally believe that the best way to do that is by showing how hard you're going to work. And if you don't have examples of your work, let's say I'm going to translate this to what I'm currently doing. Let's say I'm looking for a video job because I'm a videographer now. If I show somebody my work, then I have proof of what I'm doing. But let's say I'm a brand new videographer and I don't have any videos of my past work. I'm just trying to get into the industry, but I'm really good at what I do and I have a passion to learn. I think it would be much better for you to meet with the potential client and be honest with them and say, hey, I'm just starting out, but I promise you that I'm going to do my absolute best to provide you with the highest quality service and the highest quality product. And if I don't know something, I'm going to do my best to figure it out, and I'm going to do it for you because you're somebody that I respect. This is a project that I really like. And I think that example translates to many other parts of your life, like me at the Shaolin Temple. I'm saying that I'm not a fantastic martial artist right now. I've been training, you know, my whole life, but I'm not really that good. And what I'm proving to you is that I'm willing to put in the hard work and that this is something that I'm really am actually passionate about. Whereas most people that show up are there on the package tour or want the photograph. I'm actually willing to sacrifice my own personal comfort to attain a goal, that you can help me achieve.
The guy who slept in the car that I mentioned, he has a saying, you can't steer a parked car. And he has people ask him for help all the time. And if they seem like they're moving forward and all he has to do is help them steer a little bit, he's totally willing to do it. But if they're parked and they got the parking brake on, they're not in motion, there's nothing he can do for them. And it fits with what you're saying. That's something that's stuck in my mind ever since the first time I heard that, is you can't steer a parked car. Show them you're not a parked car.
Yeah. Motivation and showing that you have motivation is probably the most important thing you can do when it comes to proving to somebody that they can invest time in you and it won't be wasted. If you're asking for somebody to mentor you and they have to keep you motivated, it's not going to look good on you. Instead, if you're there every morning, if you're showing up ahead of time and you're doing things outside the box to prove your worth, then you're much more likely to get the type of response that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Can we jump over to online business for a second? So, speaking of mentorship, I don't know if Johnny even knew that he was mentoring you in online business. but if I remember right, you were following his podcast or blog or both.
Yeah, so actually I met Johnny Jen from the Travel Like a Boss podcast when he was sort of in his past life as Johnny Jen, broke Muay Thai guy. And so he ran a blog, which is still in existence. It's called My Fight Camp. And he traveled around to different Muay Thai fight camps and gave sort of reviews and funny videos and some interesting pictures, and sort of gave things like cost of living in Thailand and little short articles like that. It wasn't monetized at all because he didn't know about online business. He just had a little blog for his friends and family.
And got some free training out of it.
And got some free training out of it every once in a while.
And made money teaching scuba diving? Was that?
Yeah, previous to this, he had been making money scuba diving and living in Thailand as cheaply as possible, doing what at the time he loved, which was diving. But he ended up sort of having a midlife crisis and realizing that the money he's making diving isn't going to support him in the long run, and sort of falling out of love with diving, because once you start doing a passion for money, you end up losing the fun part. And he ended up falling out of love with diving and decided, hey, another way that people out here in Thailand make money is by fighting professionally. And so I ended up meeting him at Tiger Muay Thai and Phuket Top Team in Phuket, Thailand. And we ended up training together and becoming friends. And both of us were, basically broke fighters. He lived in a grass shack. I lived in a little sparse studio room, and our living expenses were probably $400 to $450 each. And we support ourselves either by fighting, or I was doing odd jobs. We used to sell chia seeds and all sorts of other stuff just to make money. I was cooking for some fighters at the gym.
Chia seeds.
Chia
Is
seeds.
that a code word for something?
No, chia seeds. Like chia. They actually are a really good health food, and you can look up.
Do you sprout them first and eat them, or just eat the
seed?
seed?
You can.
Okay.
They end up sprouting into a little gel. And you can get more information about this by typing into Google the Aztec diet, or typing in chia seeds and amino acids and stuff like that. You can find that information online, and I definitely suggest people to check that out because chia seeds are pretty amazing, and I must say that they're a staple of my diet.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, they're actually fantastic.
We've talked about all kinds of nutrition stuff. I don't think I ever heard anything about chia seeds, huh?
Yeah, it's because I haven't found them in Chiang Mai yet. But I'm on the pathway. I'm looking for them. If anyone out there knows about where I can find chia seeds in Chiang Mai, let me know. Find me on Facebook. Send me a message.
You know what? I think you and I are so used to something you just mentioned that we didn't even talk about it. But you probably blew somebody's mind when you said that you guys were living on about $400 a month.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Phuket is, I've actually never been there, but I've heard plenty of people talk about it, and I've been to some other islands, like Samui, and, that's not the cheapest part of Thailand. It's very touristy and developed and all that. So you managed to live off 400. That was a little while ago. But I think, we're here in Chiang Mai right now, and somebody that needs to can live for $600 a month here. That's kind of your rule of thumb in Chiang Mai. You could pull it off. What was my rent? At the last place I stayed, my rent was about $106 a month before utilities, and the utilities were like another $50 maybe. So I guess I want to just, if somebody was like, wait, tell me more about that. If you're in between jobs right now, or you're making any kind of money in a location independent way, you may have already heard of Thailand, but you can come over here, eat amazing food. We just went to dinner at a little place called Ma Lin Plaza, which it was Ben's first time there, and it's close to where I live, so I wanted to show him. And let's see, I got green curry, not a small portion, a big old bowl of green curry with tons of veggies in there and chicken, and that was, I think, 50 baht for that dish, which is about $1, like, what is that?
$1.60?
Yeah, less than $2, something like that, $1.60. And what did you get? You got the fish for 45 baht.
Yeah, I got a whole fish for $1.50.
Yeah.
and that fish came with rice, and then we also got 2 vegetable dishes. One of them had chicken in it, and we're not talking small portions. We're talking Western-sized portions, and our meal for 2 people to where we were stuffed
205
was 205 baht, which is less than $6. So, for what you can pay for like a fruit smoothie or, and we also had fruit smoothies.
Yeah, and those were 30 baht, which is just under $1.
Yeah, so for basically what you get for one McDonald's meal, you can feed 2 people a healthy, paleo-friendly meal.
And that was 2 meals each.
Yeah, 2 whole meals each.
We
plus
just pile on it. We order whatever we want to eat. Or this is what I do a lot. I order whatever sounds good. And then on top of that, I get either mixed vegetables or the Morning Glory, which is like a giant green bean, something really nutritious, along with whatever I really want.
So basically what we're saying is for, let's say, $600 to $800 a month, you can sort of live as lavishly as you want, not worry about what you're spending, and come in certainly under $1,000, possibly way under, without even trying to save money.
Mm-hmm. I just went from my small studio that was about $106 a month before utilities to this place, which is like probably 4 times as big as my last place, and the balcony is bigger than my last apartment by far. It's probably like 3 times the size of my last apartment. On the 6th floor with a view of the beautiful like mountains with the jungle all over it, and I can see the city and the rainstorms and the sunsets and the rainbows and the crazy fighter jets and all that. I'm paying 300, just under 300. No, it's about 300 on the nose, $300 a month, and then another 60 or 70 bucks in utilities. So anyway, I had a friend. He worked seasonally doing sports courts. This is the guy who first convinced me to come check out Thailand about 10 years ago. In the decent weather part of the year in Washington, he would build like basketball courts, tennis courts and stuff. And then he'd take the whole winter off and come over to Thailand. And he would save enough in the 6 or so months that he worked to come over here and live very well on the beach on Koh Samui for the other 6 months. So anyway, just a quick eye-opener for anybody out there that if you want to spend time on in a tropical location all winter long for definitely under $1,000 a month, you can do it. No problem.
Yeah, and you could even probably do it for $500 a month.
Yeah.
If you decide and you committed to living in a place for a really long period of time. Let's say you say, I'm going to rent this apartment 1 year in advance, and I'll pay for 6 months upfront. They'll probably give you a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
And in truth, you could really live here without budgeting too much for $6,000 a year.
Yeah, I'd agree. What I'm doing is a 3-month lease. So even if you didn't want to live here year-round, you can get a deal like I described. And you're right. If I committed to a year on this place, I'd never ask them, but it would be cheaper. I don't know what they charge for the year, but it's kind of a mind blower. If you're listening to this from Norway right now, your lunch costs more than I spend in any given day on everything.
Yeah, my rent back in California, I just moved here 2 months ago, but my rent back in California was $1,600 per month. And right now, my rent is $123 a month, and that's including utilities and a maid.
Yeah. So,
life is pretty good out here, and life is really cheap out here. So definitely, if you have a location-independent business, think about coming to Chiang Mai. Also, probably the greatest thing about living in Chiang Mai is the fact that there's a huge community of digital nomads that are all out here making money online. And I don't know what it is about Chiang Mai, maybe it's something in the water, but everyone out here is so friendly and open and willing to give advice that just even in the last 48 hours, I've learned so much about online business that I'm going to increase sales on my site. I'm going to be able to optimize my SEO a little better. And this is all free information that people are giving me just when we're having dinner or out to lunch or grabbing coffee, or I just meet someone at one of the co-working spaces. So in my first 2 weeks here, I ended up making about $600 extra, just like extra just because when I showed up, I learned a few simple tricks to optimize my store. And so I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh, I should totally be doing that. And so not only did my store start doing better, but I also got a whole bunch of freelance jobs and met a whole bunch of great people. I started 2 new blogs, and I have a t-shirt business, and there's all sorts of things that I just started in the first 2 weeks that I was here that helped me make $600 extra that I wouldn't have made back in the States. And honestly, it took me about 2 hours of actual work, and the rest of the time was just like hanging out and networking. And I learned so much that I was able to take all this information that I'm learning out here and implement it and make money from it.
It's funny that you say that, because I've talked with you about this and some other people about how we have this sort of, it's programmed, it's ingrained into us. We've been conditioned to feel like if you're not spending 8 hours like at a desk, you're not working. And when I think back to, I've also had people give me pointers that hugely changed my business. And I'm thinking back to how I know those people. One of them was because I went on this swimming trip to the quarry. That was the first time I met this particular guy. And I don't know, I probably wouldn't, if I would have just been sitting at my desk grinding, I would have never talked to him about what we talked about. And it was funny, there's something, like you said, about Chiang Mai, because even though I got a piece of advice within the first month I was here that more than doubled what I was bringing in every month. When I sold my business in Bellingham, Washington, and I had what I knew was over a year's worth of expenses living here, probably close to 2 years. And so I said, you know what? I may be making just enough to break even on living expenses in Thailand. I wasn't making enough to cover my expenses in Bellingham, Washington with just my online business. But I said, I'm going to go over there. I'm making money at a pace where I'm going to break even, and I'm just going to kind of take the leap of faith that once I'm putting my full-time effort towards the online business, I'll get better at it, and I'll develop it to a point where I can sock some money away every month. And that happened so quickly, it blew my mind. And the ironic thing about it was the biggest tip that somebody gave me. It was literally just a new service to subscribe to that helped my video site out big time. And it was from a guy in Bellingham where I had just left. It was like one of the 2 or 3 people I knew in Bellingham that were even remotely interested in online business, because it's just not like Chiang Mai. There's no community there. And I got here, and then he told me via Skype or an email or something about this service that he was using that helped him monetize better on his traffic. And so I did the same thing. We both have big Facebook pages. And, I went from like a $600 a month to like a $2,400 a month. And it kind of blew my mind. And I've had several people tell me it doesn't always make sense. But if you start taking action, like you start getting results, even if it's not very logical. And that's kind of some like Twilight Zone stuff. But I left Bellingham and then got a great piece of advice from a guy in Bellingham. It's almost like those Shaolin monks. You got to prove to them how much you want it. There's some kind of cosmic version of that.
Yeah, you have to prove to the universe that you're willing to take action. And that's actually, we're going to get into some hippie stuff, but I have to say that life enjoys momentum. And so if you're doing stuff every day, you're making yourself 1% better than you were the day before, you're moving forward. Whereas if you're sort of stagnating and you're not willing to take action, you're not going to pick up that phone and talk to the person that you really need to, or make that business decision. If you're willing to put things off, then I think the universe recognizes that and stops giving you opportunities.
It's, a guy today gave me the opportunity. He's doing this conference here in Chiang Mai that is going to attract a lot of like really interesting people. It's oh boy, can I remember the name of it? It's a guy named Buddy. He's an awesome guy. I wish I could plug it right now. Anyway, LeaderCast, and it's everywhere. It's called LeaderCast, and it happens in Atlanta, but you can watch it all over the place. And so they put on local events. He's doing a one here, and we were talking about my game, and he's like, hey, this is actually taking place on Facebook messages. He's like, hey, if you want to get up in front of LeaderCast, I don't know when, during a break or something, and pitch your game, you're welcome to. And he's not asking for a dime. I was just like taken aback. Are you serious? And I think it's just because he sees all my posts about the game, and we're doing test games and blah, blah, blah. And I offered to do test games for like any of his coworkers or his family, or if he has friends, whatever, And yeah, man, it doesn't always make sense. But like, okay, cool, yeah, I'll be at this conference and get to plug my game. I don't know, man. It's input equals output is what a friend of mine used
I
to
think
say.
it also has to do with what we were talking about earlier. You're not pretending like, hey, this game is going to sell 1 million copies. It's the best game ever. Everyone should know about it. Everyone should plug it. This is the best
Yeah.
game ever. Instead, you're not faking it till you make it. You're just being really real about it. I have this awesome product, and I'm going to release it soon, and I think it's really great. It's changed a lot of people's lives. Like, you're not
Yeah.
being over the top with it. You're just being real about it and sharing with people around you how great it is what you're doing. Like, you're not boasting about it, but you're not hiding the fact that you're doing this. And by putting it in front of more eyeballs and by putting yourself out there and opening yourself up to social failure
Yeah.
and allowing people to see this thing that could possibly like crumble around you opens people up and makes them want to help you because you're actually doing it. You're not talking about it. You're not talking about, oh, I have this great business idea. I should totally do this. Instead, you're trying it. And whether you succeed or fail, nobody cares. If people have a platform to be able to help you, to be able to teach you martial arts or to be able to help you with your online business, they're willing to help people that are putting themselves out there and actually trying it and actually doing it.
And, you touched on it. The pregame jitters. You're a fighter. I'm sure you felt the pre-fight thing. I'm sure it's a lot like what I felt before football games. The whole day felt different. And I just wanted it to start. And right now, I sort of have like a prolonged version of that going on with this BetterMe game because we're getting ready to do a Kickstarter. And Ben is helping me. He's the videographer and helping me with the script and all that kind of stuff.
Another connection made out here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know that. And, well, don't let me remind me what I meant to say. Okay, but I didn't even know you filmed stuff until we had the Tuesday lunch. This is another example of not sitting at the desk all day. I take time and go to the lunch and meet people and talk and whatever. We meet at my favorite little restaurant every Tuesday. And Ben and a guy named Zach were across the street getting coffee at the little coffee juice stand. And I just went over there because I just didn't really feel like going home yet. And I already knew Ben and liked him, and I barely knew Zach, so I thought I can get to know Zach a little bit. And they were talking about all this camera nerd stuff. They were talking about like all these weird terms and numbers and lingo. I'm like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, we were geeking out on lenses.
Yeah, but then, I kept kind of butting in, really. I kind of felt like I was interrupting.
Well, actually, we were having a business meeting, and Dan, who lives in the area, just like rode past on his motorbike and like crashed our business meeting. So it was fun having him around, but it was a little awkward because we should we keep on with our business meeting? Like, he just sat down and started sipping his coffee. Like, we were sitting there, like, talking about a future job that we could possibly collaborate on. And Dan's like, hey, guys, what's up? Yeah. And then, like, we were like, hey, how's it going? And, like, we were sort of expecting him to get his coffee and, like, keep going. But he ended up hanging out with us for about 45 minutes and while we had our business meeting. So it was actually really cool.
You know what, Mike? Here's a quick life hack. I like to say that because it's such a fad right now. Here's a quick life hack for you. When there's like that weird tension and you're kind of interrupting a business meeting, if you just say like, oh, sorry, I'm interrupting your business meeting, huh? But then you sit down anyway, it kind of like you addressed it and you kind of like closed the topic.
Yeah, broke the ice. He was now a part of our business meeting.
Exactly. Like, I acknowledge that you're having a business meeting. I'm also sitting down with my coffee now. and then I wanted to hear them talk about film stuff. And because Ben didn't know it yet, but one of the things that was kind of bugging me was I knew that I needed to do a video for my Kickstarter, and I had no idea who was going to help me with that. I knew that I could set up my webcam and just talk to the mic, but other than that, I don't know anything about film. So I was really like eavesdropping to see if one of these guys could help me with the thing. And it turned out that Zach was talking to Ben about filming a different event. And so that was some social proof. Like, oh, these guys both seem to know a lot about weird numbers and words about cameras. And Zach is interested in hiring Ben. So that made me think, like, maybe Ben is worth hiring, And so I listened a little more. And then after you and Zach got really specific on your business deal, I'm like hearing Ben's rates, like what his hourly rate is. And like, seriously. So then I'm like, I think what I said at some point was like, you might have just got 2 jobs. And you're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I got to do a Kickstarter for my board game, which
I don't even think we talked about it that time. I think you said you might have just gotten 2 jobs, hopped on your motorbike, and like run away.
Okay, yeah.
And then Zach and I were like, well, I guess Dan was just part of our meeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hey, maybe we should shake hands on this deal.
Right. And so, boy, okay, you were supposed to remind me where I was going with that.
You were talking about putting yourself out there.
Yeah. So, something that I've only told like you, and I know I told somebody else, but I can't remember who. It's not many people know, because for some reason I feel like the need sometimes to do that fake it till you make it thing, like to pretend like I'm not nervous about this Kickstarter coming up. I've never done a Kickstarter campaign, and I've spent the better part of a year developing this board game and doing tons of test games and like spending a lot of time thinking about what cards, what actions should be a part of the game, and just I mean, have you ever tried to write rules for a board game? Oh my gosh. Every time you change one, then you have to change like 5 more, and then then you play it and realize you missed 2 other things. Whatever. It's been fun, but it's a lot of work, and everybody knows I'm working on it. So like, oh my God, what if the Kickstarter doesn't go the way I want it to? And there's just that kind of anxiety and that lead up to that. So then something that I tell other people that I need to remember is like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is I don't get enough on the Kickstarter. And the way Kickstarter works is if your goal is $25,000 and you get $24,500, you get 0. You have to get your goal or you get nothing. And so, but then I thought about, okay, well, if the Kickstarter goes down in flames, there's another one called Indiegogo. I'll try an Indiegogo. And then I came across an article about Kickstarters that failed on their first try and then succeeded on their second or third try. And then I started thinking about people that would probably partner with me on the thing. Like, hey, I need $25,000. You want to go in halvesies on this for the first 1,500 games? So anyway, it's just like once you start thinking specifically about the worst case scenario, and then okay, well, if that worst case scenario happened, then what could I do? It's like that boogeyman. You see him with the lights on, and he's not that scary. What are you writing?
I have a Teespring campaign that's ending tonight, and I have to make sure that I check it.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I'm just making myself a little note.
If we were live, we could tell everybody what shirt they should go buy right now. But
yeah, absolutely.
It'll end before this comes out.
To add to what Dan was saying, I've been living in Asia for a long time. Basically it's the past 11 years. When I first moved out here when I was 15. And, I've been traveling back between the United States and in Asia. And every time, I live a pretty nomadic lifestyle. And this last time that I was back in the States, I was back for the longest period of time I've ever been. It was 2 whole years straight. And I'd never done that before. I'd never actually stayed in one place longer than 6 months my entire life. And so being in a small beach community in California, like I started to develop roots and like had friends, family, girlfriend, the whole deal. And, I started drop shipping, which is the style of online business that I'm currently doing, about a year ago. And, at the same time, I was going to school, I was working full time, I was doing 2 internships, I was like really maxing out my time. And even though I had a profitable online business making over $1,000 a month, I was spending so much time doing other things to try to pay the bills and feel productive in regular society back in the States that I totally neglected building my currently profitable online store. And I didn't have a community of entrepreneurs around me keeping me motivated and telling me I didn't have any mentors telling me the next step and where I should go next. And I also had a preconceived notion that I couldn't succeed because I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough. There are other people out there that are better than me at this. They're just naturally better at this. And it's funny because, I'm a martial artist, I'm an athlete, and I understand that, nobody's better than you. You just have to put in the hard work, And if I didn't have a community around me helping me and motivating me in the field that I was really interested in, which was online business. And so even though I know these lessons, I was still getting sucked into the black hole of sort of negativity. And I also was listening to my friend's podcast, Johnny's podcast, Travel Like a Boss. And there was a 19-year-old kid from Israel named Devere.
I remember that episode.
Who was 19 years old. He listened to Johnny's podcast. He decided that he was going to move to Chiang Mai and bootstrap his business, and which bootstrapping, for people that don't know, is living really cheap, and instead of taking a loan from a bank or getting venture funding, you're self-funding through your profits. And so he decided to come out to Chiang Mai and bootstrap, and he had a successful online business and was making enough to where he was out here living a fantastic life. And I realized, wait a second, I'm 26, I'm here. This kid, he's only 19. Like, he's not a super genius. And he was saying that, like, I'm just a regular guy. I just have ambition to do it. And I was like, I've been to Asia so many times in the past, but taking that next step and moving out here and putting myself out there like that was really scary for me. I was getting negativity from my friends, from my family, from everyone in my circle saying, when you go out there, like, you're going to fail, you're not going to make it, you're going to be back in 3 months because you're going to run out of money, and all this stuff, all this negativity stuff. And I was getting sucked into this black hole of negativity. And after listening to that podcast, I immediately decided, okay, I'm going to go to Thailand. I ended up putting my truck on the market. I sold all my earthly possessions and ended up moving to Chiang Mai, Thailand, and buying a ticket the next month for my trip out. Of course, there were some hijinks that took place, and it ended up taking me 2 months to come out here. But you can read all about that on my blog, Bootstrapping HQ,
That's a
and
great
read about
URL.
my $2,000 mistake and how you can avoid it. Basically, I discovered some travel hacks that get you around the Thai visa requirements out here, to where you can fly on a one-way ticket, and also you can fly out here without having a ongoing ticket, which is something that's really difficult to do if you don't have those documents. So you can definitely,
you know what? I did that, and I didn't even know it was hard.
Oh my goodness! Well, here's Dan's blown my mind.
Maybe I got lucky that the immigration guy was in a good mood that day.
Oh my goodness! Well, I had difficulty, so here I am trying to plug my.
Hey, if you're not good, you can just be lucky, right?
Yeah. Hey. Well, that's actually has to do with what we're talking about. Don't be afraid of rejection. Just try it out. Dan tried it out. He didn't even know that he was supposed to be scared of it, and he tried it out, and it worked out. So,
and probably
just put yourself out there.
Worst case, I mean, they should go read your information. But if you're dumb like me and you show up and you haven't even looked into it, I mean, worst case, I'm going to probably walk to some ticket counter and buy a ticket to, like, Malaysia for 29 days later or something, right? Like, I mean, it's a joke around here. You can buy a one-way ticket for like $60 to some other country. You really can. But you touched on a couple of things. Okay, you know what I forgot to tell you?
Oh,
and I usually say it at the beginning too. The goal of each episode of this podcast is that, like, what I really want it to do for people is I want everybody listening to get at least one nugget of something that they can actually really use, or that they'll, like, never forget.
Well, it's great that you're telling me this now after we're 1 hour into the podcast.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that's why I was really hammering on that point of, like, camping out outside the Shaolin Temple. And
you have to put yourself out there and not be afraid of rejection, because the worst that can happen is they say no. And if you just turn around after they say no the first time with your tail between your legs and go back to your comfortable life, you're giving them the option. You're telling them, no, I'm not willing to put myself out there. You have to continually keep trying over and over and over again, and not be afraid of failure, because by not participating, you're accepting failure as the only option. By putting yourself out there, even though you might have a small chance of success, you're giving yourself a 100% more probability for success than if you just didn't even show up.
Yeah. And you said something about you were talking about online business and the what was his name from Israel?
Devere.
Devere, who inspired you, and I remember that episode. That was a good one. There's another guy named Derek who, do you know about him? Like within 3 weeks he was making sales, and within, I don't know, like within a month he pretty much was paying all his living expenses off of the same course that you took and the same one that Devere took. So in case somebody's out there going like, tell me what the mother effing course is, isn't it AntonMethod.com?
Yeah, go to AntonMethod.com, and it's a fantastic course.
Yeah.
It's on drop shipping. I'm not employed by the course or anything,
Yeah.
but I definitely give it my approval. And it's what's allowed me to move out here, and it's also allowed dozens of other people that I've
Johnny,
met.
Derek,
Paige, this other guy,
Anton's
Mark,
sister.
yeah,
Devere.
tons of people.
And you know, I actually have personal experience with it. I was interested in the course. I'd heard a lot about it. I bought it. I took it. I built a store. I made one sale, and then honestly, like I told you, right after I got here, my existing business took off. And the reason I took on the drop shipping was to just pay the bills. But then my other things started paying the bills. So honestly, I didn't need the drop shipping, so I decided to put my time on the BetterMe game and some other little things like that. So anyway, it worked.
Okay.
I made a sale. It worked.
Yeah, we also don't want to sugarcoat it. Like,
Oh yeah.
For the first, I'm just going to use Derek as an example. So I work out of a space here in Chiang Mai called Pun Space, and it's a paid co-working space that costs like $100 a month. And the reason why that's relevant is because most of the co-working spaces out here are just coffee shops, and so people don't pay like a monthly subscription or anything. And so because they're not paying for it, they might go there and they might socialize and they might go on Facebook. But for everybody that's in Pun Space, they're paying for it.
Yeah.
And so they're going to go there and they're going to work their butt off. Even though it's $100 and like the people back in the States, that's not very much. Out here, that's like basically actually that's my entire rent. So, it's proportionally very large out here at a huge expense. And so, people take it seriously. And so I show up at Pun Space at 6:30 every morning, and I don't leave until, let's say, 7 at night. But Derek, when he was building his online store, he was there at 6:30 every morning, and then he was there until 10 at night every single day for 3 weeks. And by the end of 2 weeks, he had made his first sale, and by the end of 3 weeks, he had sold like $10,000 worth of product.
Yeah.
And so, he was grinding and really going for it. He's doing like 14, 15-hour days.
Yeah.
That's without including the lunch break. But, he's sitting there all day killing it and really working as hard as he can. And because of that, people like myself and people like Johnny and other dropshippers that were there at the time of him building his store invested time in helping him and giving him critiques and sharing information about how he can optimize traffic, because similar to the Shaolin Temple, he was trying his hardest, and you could see the effort and you could see how badly he wanted it. He was there all day.
How could you not want to give him 5 minutes of your time to just help him out?
Exactly. Exactly.
You would have to be a pretty cold-hearted individual and not want to help that guy.
Yeah, if somebody's willing to put in the hard work, it's invaluable. And, if there's somebody that's posting selfies of them in Pun Space saying, hey, I'm working all day, but then you never see them, like they come in for 2 hours, you're not going to help that guy. That guy's faking it till he makes it, but 100% fake. If there's somebody that they're grinding all day, every day, and isn't blasting everyone about it, saying, hey, this is how hard I work, instead he's just doing it, you can't help but help that guy.
Yeah, there's a ratio of work to seeking other people's time and advice, and if you're working 3-hour days, but you want every day somebody to go to lunch with you and talk to you for 2 hours, you can't do that. The other thing I wanted to say, you touched about, actually, I don't know what you said that made me think of this, but hero, and like, we don't want to sugarcoat it and make it look easy. And that's the same with, here's what I'm really getting at. Read biographies. when you read biographies of people that have had massive success in whatever it is, whatever your definition of success is, it could be you look into people who are successful in the arts, or they have a lot of money, or they're an athlete, or whatever. If you look at their story and you really get to know it at more than a superficial level, more than what you see on like Sports Center and stuff, you're going to see that they all struggled. Like Derek Jeter was an okay minor league baseball player, and he worked his butt off to become a great baseball player. But if you have this idea in your mind that that's all talent, that's not something you control. But if you see that all these guys struggled and they started out, I think it was when you were talking about how you told these Shaolin guys, like, you come in there like, I'm an aspiring martial artist, but I need help. All these guys start there. I mean, the Richard Bransons and everybody. So if you realize that, you're much less likely to become like frustrated and like disappointed in yourself. You go, hey, I'm in elite company here. Like, everybody that's done anything has had failures and setbacks and doubts. And maybe not so much the doubts, actually, but go and check out biographies and see how hard these people work and how it's not all talent. And these stories like Derek, like you said, oh my God, this guy did it in 3 weeks. He just must be some kind of web genius. No, it's not like that. DeVere, probably the same thing. I did it in a different way when and I'm not your role model for drop shipping, but I made a sale and I built a store, and it took me more like 2 months, which is what I usually hear, 2 or 3 months maybe, depending on how much time people have available. How long did it take you to get going?
It took me 2 months. So what would happen was I was doing a internship and I was going to school. So I would go to school. I would leave the house for class at about 8. So class is at 8. I'd leave at about 7:30. I'd hop on my bike because I couldn't afford to pay for insurance for my car. So I just sat there. So I hopped on my bike. I went to school. After school, I would go to my internship, and then I'd be home at like 8 or 9 at night. And then I would work on the dropshipping store from 8 or 9 at night till about midnight. So I was doing like 4 to 6. If I was really inspired, I'd stay up until 2. And then I'd wake up at 6, hop on my bike at 7, and go to school. And so I was really grinding. And even though I wasn't spending much time on it every day, it built up over time. So it took me about 2 months. And I'm talking like 4 to 6 hours of like actual hard work. I'm not just sitting there on the computer like checking Facebook. I'm like, doing what Anton tells you to do in the course. And so it took me about 2 months to do.
Yeah.
And then after 2 months, I made my first sale. I made $280 that month. Then the next month, it just came under 500, so it was 490 something. And then of December of this year, I got really just under 1,000. And then in January, I've hit 1,000, and every single month after that, I've hit $1,000 profit. And just recently, I'm getting closer to 1,500. So I'm not worried about sharing numbers because I'm not trying to tell people I'm some internet mogul. I'm telling you I'm out here bootstrapping. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not telling people I'm making it. Instead, I'm sharing the fact that this wasn't my first online store. I tried another one in that first 2 months, and I failed at it. I didn't follow the course. I did my own thing, and I tried to make some shortcuts, and I ended up totally failing at it. But the thing is, I knew that it worked because my buddy Johnny, my good friend that I knew years ago training in Phuket, was making money at it. And I'm like, you know what? I love you, Johnny, if you listen to this, but he's not smarter than me. He's not some special guy. He's not some guru. He's just a regular dude. And you know what? If it worked for him, it can work for me too. I just need to go back, follow the directions, and actually put in the hard work. And I tried it again, and at the end of that 2 months, I made my first sale, and you heard about that, how that turned out. And so, I tried to start a new online store this February, and that failed too. So, I'm cool with sharing failures. When you look at people's Facebook feeds and with social media, you're able to like curate your own history. You're able to like only share the positive things. But, I'm totally open with sharing the fact that like I've been here 2 months. I tore my ACL after being here 2 weeks, and I spent the last like month in bed. And then while I was in bed, my computer ended up crashing. My new Mac computer that's only 8 months old ended up crashing, and I had to take it to a repair shop here that ended up holding it ransom until I paid them under the table 2,000 baht, which is $60, which isn't very much. But it took me 3 weeks to realize that they were holding onto it, saying that it wasn't repaired, waiting for me to pay them under the table to release it to me. Like, these are the struggles that people have that they don't share, and it's really disingenuous. Like, I know so many people out here that are actually struggling, that are sharing on Facebook, life is great, everything's going perfectly. But
picture in the pool.
Yeah, the picture in the pool and the drinking the coconut. But in reality, like, there are real life struggles, you know? You can't escape real life. And, you know, real life is beautiful and gorgeous and amazing, but there are also these little pits of darkness that make the light so much more vibrant and alive. And that's the beauty of life, is the fact that you're supposed to feel pleasure, you're supposed to feel pain, you're supposed to feel dark times, light times, the times that you're incredibly happy, times that you're incredibly sad. And the sorrow in life makes the joy in life so much more. So what I'm saying is that people should just be real about the struggles of life. And instead of sugarcoating things and saying, hey, you'll make $1 million online this week just by taking my course, instead, you should share the fact that, you know, this is real life. Like, you know, you should realize that there are pitfalls and there are struggles and there are dark times for everybody. And it's not all rosy.
And you know, not only will people, you come across more authentic and all that, and all these, the ways that it makes other people want to help you and all of that, it's such a relief to get that crap off your chest. You know, a couple episodes ago, I talked about my big real estate project that just went and bombed. You know, it was like the biggest project I ever did, and it did not go as planned at all. And that I just kind of spontaneously started talking about it on the podcast, and it was like, this feels really good to just say it. I'm not, you know, not having to like hide it and hope, oh my God, I hope people don't find out about that. They'll think, you know, the whole fraud thing, like then they won't like trust me and think I'm somebody that should, you know, why would you even listen to my podcast if you knew I had a failure in my past? You know, that's all just mental garbage. Like, take it out, kick it to the curb, just get it out there. You know, take that weight off of yourself. Because you're right, everybody's gone through it. You know, and if you haven't failed, then you probably haven't been trying, you know? It's like we were talking about rock climbing the other night. And my dad had a friend, and my dad was like in mountain rescue and all that stuff, and he had this buddy that was a big rock climber, and he said, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough. You know, don't be afraid to fall. It's like we talk about jiu-jitsu a lot. It's like, go out there and get tapped 10 times, you know? Like, you know, you got to do that. Everybody goes through that, and that's how you get better. Be ready to fail and learn, and then come back and try again, and next time you're a little bit smarter.
Yeah, and you can form your own opinion about yourself. You can change your perspective on any situation. Like, I have 2 bum knees. Out of the 8 ligaments that you're born with, I only have 3 left, which means on one of my knees, I only have 1 ligament left, which means if that snapped, you know, like, I'm on jelly leg. You know, I'm not allowing that to be my story. Instead, this is a story of me making enough money over the course of the next 4 years that I'm able to pay for double knee reconstruction and ACL reconstruction and MCL reconstruction and LCL reconstruction. And this is the pathway of me attaining that goal. This isn't the pathway and the storyline of somebody who's injured. This is the storyline of somebody that's overcoming adversity and finding a solution for my $400,000 medical bill, just so I can walk normally. This is the story of somebody that came from his deathbed and cured himself of a chronic, debilitating, and life-threatening disease through diet and exercise. This is the story of somebody who failed at building an online business, but continued to persevere and created a profitable one. You create your own story, and wherever you are in your life right now isn't the end. It continues on. And so you can turn it into a comedy, you can turn it into a tragedy, and you can turn it into an inspirational movie. You are the hero of your own story, and it starts now. Where do you want it to end?
Okay.
Quoting Joe Rogan.
The podcast is over. That was powerful.
Boom.
I don't even know what to say.
Cool.
And I was kind of joking about it being over, unless you're tired.
No.
It is getting late.
Hey.
But, wow. You know what? That makes me want to ask you. Because you just said all that with 100% conviction. You believe everything you just said. How do you get your mind to that point? Obviously, you've been through a lot of struggles that strengthened you. What do you do to program your mind? Do you deliberately do things to program that into your mind? Who do you spend time around? Do you allow people to hang around you that would try to tell you all that was garbage that you just said?
I think it comes from a culmination of a lot of things. I grew up, from the age of 4 to the age of 14, like I mentioned earlier, just traveling around. I didn't have a peer group. I hung out with my family at all times. Like I lived in such a sheltered world that I didn't know anything about the world. Like I can't even describe to you. Like, okay, so until I was 14, I didn't know that Sesame Street wasn't real. Like I thought that Big Bird was a real thing. And it seems really bizarre for people, but I traveled around from circus to circus. I knew trapeze artists and fire breathers. I was one myself. I juggled chainsaws. One of my biggest mentors was a guy with a butterfly tattoo on his head, and who would take his necklace off and shove it in his nose and would come out his mouth. And he told lewd jokes and breathe fire. And that was a guy that I thought was super cool and really normal. He was just a normal guy. So I lived in this bizarro world, and I didn't go to normal school. I didn't have any peers my own age that, went to elementary school and then middle school and high school. I was just sort of an experiment in alternative education. And so, I for a couple years was really bitter about that. I hated traveling. I wanted to stay in one place. I wanted a peer group. I wanted to have a girlfriend. I wanted to, eat McDonald's cheeseburgers and drink Slurpees like all these other kids that I saw. And, I lived this alternative lifestyle, and I resented my parents. I resented my brother. I resented my sister, and I resented the lifestyle that I lived. And for those of you that don't know, I have a brother that has cerebral palsy, and he's completely paralyzed except for his eyes and his tongue. He has extremely severe cerebral palsy to the point that he cannot talk, and he cannot have any control over his body besides his eyes and his tongue. So the way that he communicates with people is by clicking. So 1 click is yes, and 2 clicks is no. And that's the only way he can communicate with the world. This is a guy who relies on other people to help him survive. If he's choking, he has to believe and have a conviction that there are people that care enough about him that they'll come over and make sure he stops choking. So he needs people to watch over him 24 hours a day to survive. And he doesn't allow his disability to keep him from experiencing life. You would think that somebody that's only way to communicate with other people is through these quiet clicks. He's a guy who graduated high school with all A's and B's. He's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He's just an incredible person and incredibly positive. He doesn't see the world as a why am I disabled and everybody else is able. Instead, he's a person that cares deeply about everyone around him and sees his disability as an opportunity to touch people in a way that other people that are able to walk around and wear a suit and go to work are unable to. My brother is one of the oldest people alive with his severity of cerebral palsy, and the reason why is because my mom, who comes from a very small village in the Philippines, dedicated her entire life to taking care of a child that's not her own. She was originally my brother's nurse and my brother is my half brother from a previous marriage, and so she had no biological connection to my brother Davy. And I think by seeing their connection and also seeing my brother's positive outlook on life has allowed me over time to sort of realize that life is about perspective, and life is about choosing the narrative of your life. And my brother and my mother could absolutely have chosen different narratives and resent their existence. But instead, they've decided to make it a story of love, a story of friendship, a story of companionship, and a story of triumph, opposed to a story of the sad decline and eventual death of a disabled person. It's an incredible thing to watch and experience, and I didn't realize that until I was a teenager, and I didn't have this flip in mentality until I had my own health trauma when I was 17 and was basically on my deathbed. I realized the incredible value of perspective and the incredible value of choosing your narrative.
That's really, you told me most of that in pieces before, but the way you just put that together and the emphasis on, it never hit home with me that your mom taking care of your brother, that she is not his biological mother.
No,
that
she was actually, my dad was married to a Japanese woman at the time, and my brother was from a previous marriage to a Korean woman, and so this Japanese woman, Monica, my dad's ex-wife, was working for the UN, and my dad was working for the World Trade Organization, and they ended up living in the Philippines on a job, and it was their job to work for certain NGOs and also like help guide certain programs for the UN in the area. And so they needed a full-time nurse to take care of my brother. And Monica, who was my dad's wife, never was able to form a relationship with my brother Davy. And so Davy, who could only click to communicate, never addressed her as mom. Instead, he only addressed her as Monica. So he's able to spell, and the way he's able to spell is he created this system, sort of like texting, to where he broke the alphabet into 4 different chunks, and he's able to sort of click through and pause and double click to get to the letter that he wants. It's sort of a complicated system, but he created it himself, and he used this clicking language and never referred to Monica, my dad's ex-wife, as a mom. Instead, he always spelled her name Monica. And so when my brother, I think he was 6 years old, when he was in the Philippines looking for a full-time nurse. My dad and his ex-wife, they were interviewing a whole bunch of local Filipino nurses, and every single time when someone came in, the first thing they would ask would be, how much do I get paid? What are the hours? Do I get vacations? Do you provide food? Do I have a break? And, they went through, 20, 30 different people, and they could never find someone that showed compassion for the child that they're taking care of. And so what's funny is my mom walked in, and Davey, my brother, who can't speak, when she walked in, he said, "Mama," and he can't speak.
Wow.
So when she first walked in and he called her mama, my dad was like, "What the heck?" And so he ended up sitting down with her and said, "Hey, yeah, so these are your hours and this is how much you get paid." And she said, "Before we talk about that, can I just sit down with the child and spend a couple of hours with him and see if it works for us?" And so she came in with a completely different approach, and her and my brother, they fell in love. And he loves her like his biological mother, even though she's not. And she loves him like a biological son, even though he wasn't. And she was a Filipino nurse or a Filipino housekeeper that wasn't able to have children. And so she really bonded with my brother on a biological level and fell in love with him first. And so my dad stayed married to this Japanese woman, Monica, and soon she was like, "You know what? I'll never be able to be a mother to Davy," which is my brother's name. "I'll never be able to be a mother to Davy, and you know what? This relationship, we just can't continue." And so he ended up having my mom stay on as a nurse and didn't even have like any emotional attachment to her at all. And it took them years of being in an employer-employee sort of nurse situation before my dad realized, "Oh my God, this person's an amazing, caring, wonderful person that's there and providing everything that a perfect wife and girlfriend and partner is able to provide." So they ended up falling in love, and now they've been married for I think 40 years. So it's interesting because you could spin that story another way. You could say that story is a story of a local Filipino nurse who comes in and breaks up a marriage and then is sort of a mail order bride who's taking care of the white man's son for no pay for years and years and years. You could take that a whole nother direction, but it's how you decide to tell the narrative and how you decide to see the world around you. That's really important. And seeing that story and seeing it play out and seeing how my parents and my brother and the rest of my family decide to view it from is really interesting for me and really important for me to see, and is really important for my development, and also really allowed me to process a lot of the tough things that I went through and the struggles that I went through, and really has ingrained in me that you shouldn't fake it till you make it. You should just be real with it, but be real with it from your perspective. If you see something as a negative situation, there's always a way that you can skew it as a positive. And if that's something that you need to do, I think you should do it. This is like with Dan's Kickstarter. He's talking about how, he could possibly fail. He could totally, in his own mind, tell himself that, you know what, this is a big project. I've told a lot of people that I'm doing it, and I could totally fail. I'm gonna fail. This isn't gonna work. A board game, who even plays board games anymore? There's all sorts of negative things that he could be telling himself, but instead he's coming at it from a completely different angle and saying, you know what, I'm providing a really excellent service for people.
Let me take over from there.
Lives.
Nobody's ever made a board game like this before. I've never played a personal development board game before. I've never played a game that's brought people together as quickly and in an authentic way like this before. I have no absolute guarantee that the Kickstarter will be successful. I don't see any reason it wouldn't be successful. And even if it's not, I can do another Kickstarter campaign and approach it a little bit differently. I can do a campaign on Indiegogo. I can approach individual investors to back the first print of the game. I can dig into my own pockets and fund the game. And, there's so many options. It's not going to, just like, you go to a martial arts tournament and you fail. Well, there's another tournament around the corner, Like, this Kickstarter is not, like you said, the game's not over if that Kickstarter doesn't work. It's like, okay, come back, do another Kickstarter, do an Indiegogo, approach investors. It's not over.
Yeah, and even Dan, who's talking about this, all this positive stuff, at the same time, earlier in the podcast, he's talking about how he's nervous about it. It's like game day. He doesn't know, like, I could totally fail. And it's this openness and this ability to show the duality, the fact that you can show that you're supremely confident, yet at the same time show your weaknesses to everybody, is really important. And it's something that we don't have enough of in this online business space.
Yeah, and back to biographies. In the pre-Kickstarter world, you talk to publishers or you round up investors and do it yourself. And some people still do it that way, of course. Probably the majority still go that route, actually. But what I've learned from the stories of people like Jack Canfield and countless authors, I mean, they go to publisher after publisher after publisher and get told, no, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard, blah, blah, blah. Like all these different criticisms from people who supposedly know more about the industry than you. And a lot of the stories of like the most successful books and products you've ever heard of got turned down over and over again. Rocky, Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky. He wanted to be Rocky. Everybody was like, get out of here, not a chance. He just kept at it. And eventually he found one guy who was willing to go for it, one company that was willing to go for it. So if it's not Kickstarter, whatever. That's, there's something I used to have on my wall right in front of my face when I was in real estate. And I think it was from Jack Canfield, actually, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy. SW, 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 SW. And that stood for something that I didn't want all my clients to be able to read. But it means some will, some won't, so what, someone's waiting. It's not over. Don't quit. Yeah. So, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to go back to one thing.
Yeah, do it.
So, I know we talked about my brother a little bit, but I also want to add in a little bit about my mom. And, she came from a small village in the Philippines called Cabangahan. And this is like a village that you have to hike to 2 hours from the closest city. And, she's from like basically a rural fishing village. And, this is nearly 50 years ago or longer than that, 60 years ago. And, she left the village and ended up coming to the big city and ended up becoming a slave. Somebody locked her in, like, she worked for a family, and this family had her as a domestic servant and forced her to live in, like, basically a cupboard under the stairs and locked her in at night and didn't pay her and forced her to work for them for years as a slave. And, she worked her butt off, and because of that situation for years and years and years, she decided not to see that as a negative. Instead, she saw it as a positive. And that's an incredible thing, to be able to see a situation to where you're basically a slave, and to see that as a positive situation and a learning experience is something that a lot of people, that's a negative situation that a lot of people would take as a negative.
So what meaning did she give that, or how did she spin that to be a positive?
She said that that's a learning experience to become a hard worker and to persevere and to push through, and also gave her the incentive to make more of her life. This isn't going to be her story of being, a slave in the Philippines. Instead, she's going to make her life something bigger, something better, something more. And yeah, that is a situation that a lot of people, if they spent 15 years of life as a slave in the Philippines would see that as a big negative. But instead, has spun that and turned that into a positive, and sees that as a positive part of her life because it's brought her to where she is now. So I just want to end with that, because a lot of people, like, we're talking about these struggles, we're spinning, like a Kickstarter campaign, or like a failed online business, or like, a sports career. But this is like slavery in somebody's 15 years of their life, 10 years of their life living in a cupboard under the stairs where they get locked in every night. And, that's something serious, that's something pretty big. And to go from that and to still be a compassionate, caring person that walked into an interview with my dad after escaping from her slavery situation and working as a nanny, and walking into that situation and still being compassionate enough to be interested in taking care of the child instead of the pay that she would get is the sign of somebody that has an excellent perspective and an excellent ability to see life from a really positive point of view.
That's amazing. That really is. Wow. I'm not going to tell any more of my story. That's incredible, man. I really appreciate you being so open and honest with everything. That's a mind blower, really.
Yeah. It's you could easily end the story there. There's so many hundreds of thousands of people here in Asia that get stuck in like a slavery or a trafficking situation, and that's the end of their story. Or they come out of that situation and they're bitter about it. But instead, my mom decided to use that as a positive and have that strengthen her, because she chose to not use that as her story. Instead, her story is still being written, and it's a story of triumph instead of a story of despair and sorrow. And basically, all I want to tell people is you're in the middle of your story right now. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be $150,000 in debt. You could be $2 million in debt. You could be breaking up with your girlfriend. You could have your wife cheating on you. You could be, at the end of a really successful standard career and you just don't know what to do next. Everybody's in transit in life. And oftentimes, the things that we see on Facebook, the things that we hear about from our friends are not the struggles, but instead we only see the triumphs. And being really honest with people and sharing with people the struggles in life is really something that the community should encourage. And instead, folks want to say, hey, I won the gold medal. They don't want to say, hey, I didn't go to my kid's basketball game because I decided to stay in the gym an extra 2 hours and work for it. We don't share the struggles. We don't share the things that we sacrifice. We don't share how it hurts the people around us, the things that we do to sacrifice for our supposed success. We only show the end result, and we don't show the journey. And, I'm all about sharing the journey. So here's a shameless plug. If you want to know about my journey, you can follow me at bootstrappinghq.com. And that's my journey here in Thailand. You can read about my journeys through health, fitness, and my journey towards improving my ability to get things done by following my blog at thegrassfedlifestyle.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, man, that was great. I appreciate you coming on. We may have to do this again sometime, get an update from you. And I'll give myself a shameless plug too. If you guys do want to know more about the board game we've talked about, BetterMe, right now you can go onto Facebook. It's facebook.com/BetterMeGame. And you can keep up to speed with that. It's going to be going into production here over the next several months, so keep track. But yeah, one more time for people that didn't hear it, bootstrappinghq.com and grassfed lifestyle.
Thegrassfedlifestyle.com. And, you know, if I'm shamelessly plugging and put myself out there, if anyone needs video work, logo work, digital design, you can check me out on Facebook, just Ben Finnegan, and send me a message.
Right on. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you coming on, man. All right. Have a good one, everybody. I hope you got a nugget out of this. Stay tuned. We'll have another episode coming up for you. And again, all these episodes are available at odonlife.com. Cue the wicked outro music.